President Trump had a discussion with Seal Vaughn, a comedian. And I got to confess, I've never seen one of Theo's bits. I'd like to see that because he's obviously a guy who has some very, very good political views and is good at asking questions. Plus, he's got a killer mullet, and that's a big advantage in entertainment. Super killer. They had a discussion about pharma and lobbyists, and as President Trump went through discussions in this, the topic of money came up. So what do we do? How do we confront this money? Well, one of those things is President Trump having RFK Jr. on his side. RFK Jr. understands everything about pharma. He's wrong about a lot of things, like his obsessive support of abortion at any state of life, like his insane idea that the NRA is just as responsible for school shootings or any other form of murder using a gun as the shooter themselves. His insane belief that world leaders who will not believe that the climate catastrophe is killing everybody should be put in prison. And in other things, he's spot on, like his assessment of pharma. And incidentally, he just spoke about the attack on family farms in America. There is so much that RFK Jr. and President Trump can do together. Most of it, I think, pointed at the deep state. So to hear President Trump beginning to lean in to doing something about pharma is promising to me. Very promising, because there's been two things missing for me with President Trump. One is humility, because if we're truly walking with the Lord Jesus, we have humility. The other has been a recognition of pharma. So I am so glad to hear this. If you hear the beginning of our show, we talk about our show being universally disliked by technocrats and tyrants. You know the technocrats I'm talking about, largely medical technocrats. Look, I'm still to this day on notice at YouTube. There's things I can't talk about at YouTube. So we don't. We talk about that on our full-length show, on Substack, on the audio platforms. It's YouTube's platform. They've made it very, very clear. But I can talk about alternatives to pharma, and I can do it in a very personal sense. I truly wish my dad was still alive when I began to awaken to what it is to truly be healthy. Because I'd say things to my dad. He'd say things like, hey, Todd, will you go hunting with me again? I'd say, Dad, I can't. If you fell down, I couldn't get you out of the mountains. You're not healthy enough for this. And it sometimes make him cry. My dad was a difficult guy to make cry. See, my dad refused to deal with health issues. So he was radically, horribly, sadly obese, and he suffered from tons of inflammation. Well, I, not being obese, being pretty obsessive about my health, also suffered from a ton of inflammation, even as healthy as I ate. Now, mine is probably driven by a lot of high volume exercise. That's why I have this inflammation. Yours might be driven from having a whole bunch of sugar or a whole bunch of acidic foods. You may be off balance. Please address that. Don't use ibuprofen. Ibuprofen causes inflammation. It's one of the brilliant things pharma does. Mask the symptoms of the problem you're causing. Instead, do what I do. Go to nativepathkrill.com/Todd and pick up this product, which is 6,000 times more absorbable than vitamin C, 500 times more absorbable than vitamin E, comes from the waters of the Antarctic, the purest waters we have. And for me, I simply do not need ibuprofen with this potent omega-3. So visit nativepathkrill.com/Todd to see the deals that are waiting for you today. Here's a hint, and I just did this week. The more you buy, the more you save. I even got free shipping. It's nativepathkrill.com/Todd. Seal Vaughn chatting with President Trump.
Which is a bigger problem in our country, would you say?
Opioids.
Bigger than alcohol?
Oh, for sure. I think that's one of the biggest problems.
And compare that to fentanyl?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the problem is people are making fake opioids because they can't afford real ones, or they're just getting them off the street, and then they put fentanyl in them.
Yeah. Fentanyl's like laced into everything now. It's horrible.
It's horrible, yeah. They found some in a baby rattle somewhere, I think. I don't even know where that was. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about was like, so there's like the big pharma lobbyists, like there's 1,800 big pharma lobbyists in Washington, D.C.
Right.
There's only 535 total representatives or senators total. So just the fact that there's this whole other almost drug government that's there kind of pushing pushing agendas and influencing things, like how do we stop that, man? It just seems like it's obviously killing people. Like people are dying, It's like, what do we have to do that our own government won't help us?
Well, you have to stop listening to lobbyists. I was not a big person for lobbyists. And if they have even a little access to like a president or a senator or a congressman or woman,
they're snakes.
They get a lot of money.
Yeah.
And in some cases, they just take the money. They don't do anything. But you have a lot of lobbyists in Washington pushing, and certainly a lot for all of the things that we're talking about, including winning. Alcohol.
When you're at work and you're having a discussion, let's say you and your team, maybe you lead a small team, maybe a large team, and you're having a discussion in a conference room. If your boss walks into the room, do you go, hey, what are you doing? You do not have my permission to be in here. Out. You didn't apply. Try it. Try it sometime. The solution to so much in Washington, D.C. is radical transparency. This is the solution. We should be able to observe every single staff discussion that occurs in Washington, D.C. on our property. Every room should have a camera in it. It should be fully mic'd. There's no private business when they're doing business for us. Now, you can make some exceptions, war rooms in a declared war status, investigative meetings for criminal acts, and of course, the people in D.C. will then try to make every single meeting that, and we have to fight it. The other thing we should do is radical transparency in terms of written communications, and we should put teeth into these things. If you avoid the cameras, if you take meetings off grounds, if we find out that you had a public meeting off ground discussing our business, that you did this to avoid the cameras and the microphones, that's a felony for every time you did it. And that's a clawback of your entire salary. It's that serious to me. You've been in government for 10 years and you go do this a couple of times, there's your felonies. Maybe it's 5 years per felony. We're going to take back 10 years of earnings. Don't say that that's draconian. That's done in startups. If a venture capitalist finds out that you violated fiduciary duty, they can use what are called clawback clauses. They're in your employment contracts. They can claw back your equity. They can claw back your pay, all of it. They can turn around and make you liable for the money they invested in your company. We should also have every single email that they generate stored in the cloud. We should be able to go look at them whenever we want to. And again, make the case. Hey, this is an active criminal investigation. This is an active planning for war. This is an active response to a terrorism activity. Great. Put a time limit on it. Then we get to look at it. See, people do things differently when they know they're being watched. We shouldn't. And there's that old saying that you're defined by the things you do when no one is watching you. Well, they're defined by the things they do when no one's watching them, which is bribery. If we take these steps, we can end up with something else. An insight into who doesn't care that they're being watched in Washington, D.C., and a turning of a corner, a very, very important corner. It was not uncommon for us at Microsoft or elsewhere to have a boss walk into the meeting. It wasn't uncommon in Washington, D.C. for me to walk into a meeting with my team. Sometimes I did that on purpose. I wanted to go see how the meetings ran when I wasn't there. Walk in about halfway through. Hey, are we still in the chit-chat phase or have we gotten down to work? It wasn't about spying on people. It was saying, look, there's accountability. I might just walk through the door. You do it with your kids, right? Well, yeah, I knock and then I enter. They're not our kids, but we need to remind them they're doing our business on our dime, on our time, and we'll look at anything we want to.